Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, I wanted to have a brief discussion about what is happening with the carrier, the Abraham Lincoln. Now, some of you know there have been reports saying that some of the naval personnel on board the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln are suffering from various psychological issues because of the amount of time that they have been deployed at sea. Now, to my understanding, that this carrier has been forward deployed in the Mideast area of operations, operating in the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, near the Persian Gulf, what have you, for a period of no less than about 250 days. Now, because of this extended service requirement, there have, again, been some reports of naval personnel having some psychiatric type of issues, and there have been some reports in which some sailors have reportedly tried to jump off the ship for whatever reason, either a self-harm issue or simply to try and maybe find a way to get off the vessel and come back home and maybe deal with certain domestic issues that may or may not be occurring back here in the States. Now, you got to understand something. Currently, the United States is in what is essentially a low-intensity war with Iran. That is a given fact. So right now, the requirement of the U.S. military is, at least right now, to have that vessel deployed to the CENTCOM area of operations. Yes, 250 days on board a ship, on a naval warship, can be challenging. And I would argue that being deployed on a carrier probably is not as bad as maybe being deployed on a smaller warship such as a destroyer. Now, let me hit the pause button just real quick. I actually have been to sea on a U.S. Navy warship. I spent a week on an amphibious warfare type vessel. It was, I believe, it was a variant of an LST. It wasn't one of the big amphibs that carried helicopters or anything like that. And I mean, it was fine. I mean, it's a warship, right? Where I slept and stayed, it was warm. It was cramped. It wasn't. I definitely wouldn't want to be on the ship for 250 days. But if you kind of compare and contrast some of other things that could possibly happen to you in a military service, I mean, being on a ship that you're not going to get overly cold, or you're probably not going to get overly hot as well, meaning they're air conditioned either way, heat, cold. Now again, I get being at sea for an extended period of time, especially if you have domestic things back at home and you're married, or who knows what's going on in your own personal life, and you're away, and it can be difficult to communicate. That definitely can be challenging. But look, that's what you signed up for when you joined the military. It just is. And is the crew of the Abraham Lincoln going through trials and tribulations that are worse than other military components? I would say probably not. Not just in the present, but if we look through history. I mean, think about the U.S. Marine Corps that was deployed against the Japanese during World War II for literally years in the South Pacific on these island hopping campaigns. And, they didn't benefit from having the internet or eventual real-time communications with friends and family back home. The only communications those guys had, back in the 1940s, was communication by letter, right? Writing letters home. The lost art. So I would say that obviously those Marines, sitting in the South Pacific fighting the Japanese in real combat conditions, were probably more strenuous than what these sailors are dealing with on this aircraft carrier, right? They just are. And then you look at other military roles in the U.S. military, okay? Again, for the most part, these guys aren't out in the elements, right? They're not sitting in a forest, maybe in Alaska someplace, getting rained and snowed on, in a field problem, or sitting in Lithuania or Eastern Poland in the dead of winter, facing off against Russian forces. I mean, they're not really doing that. Yeah, I mean, the possibility of getting struck by an Iranian anti-ship cruise missile or drone or something like that is present, but generally speaking, we haven't seen that occur as of yet, knock on wood. So again, is the crew of the Abraham Lincoln experiencing something that is more stressful than what other service members experience in their day-to-day duties? Now, again, I would argue that the length of time deployed is the big issue, right? Hey, we're away from our friends and family for 250 days. And that is unique. It is unique. Now, what I will also say is that, okay, well, we also have our subsurface fleet, right? We have our ballistic missile submarines. We have our nuclear attack boats that are out there as well. Now, are those crewmen spending 250 days at sea? I don't know. I mean, obviously there are more nuclear attack boats in service than there are aircraft carriers, right? There's about 11 aircraft carriers. I believe 2 of them are laid up in permanent repair right now. So realistically, 9 serviceable. So again, the nuclear attack boats, you have dozens of those. But again, I mean, you're underwater. You can't go outside, so those conditions are a bit different. I mean, would you rather be, let's say hypothetically, deployed on a nuclear submarine underwater for a period of 60 days, where you don't see the sun for an extended period of time, or it can be difficult to do that? Or would you rather be on an aircraft carrier where you can go out on the deck and you can get a breath of fresh air, you can walk around on the deck, you can exercise probably better. The crew conditions are probably not as cramped as what you would see on a submarine, right? So I mean, what's worse, the extended period on the carrier or the more cramped conditions, not seeing the sun for weeks at a time on a submarine. I guess that's a personal choice. I probably myself would rather be on an aircraft carrier for 200 days than stuck in a submarine under the ocean for a period of time. I just, obviously, that's just me. Now, going back and looking at other military service arms like the Army, being deployed or on a field problem. Maybe you're deployed to Kuwait and you're out in the desert with your combat brigade for several weeks in incredibly hot sun. And again, you don't really have the ability to kind of get out of the elements, right? So you're always hot or somewhat cold at night. Or you, again, could be deployed in a colder environment as an infantryman up in Alaska or even in Hawaii, right? During the monsoon season where it's just raining on you and you're an infantryman and you're having to go on long physical road marches, up mountains and hills and get blisters and just being generally uncomfortable, right? That for some people that would be more problematic, just the physical aspect of that, than sitting on an aircraft carrier. Maybe, who knows, maybe you have an administrative job on an aircraft carrier. I mean, there's all kinds of jobs or military occupational specialties that service members have on these carriers. Now, all jobs are not created the same. Okay, I talk to my sons, and they have very, very different roles in the military. And, it would appear from time to time one of my sons has a better quality of life than the other one. But again, that was just based on the military occupational specialty that they selected. It's just when you go into the recruiter station to sign up. A lot of these jobs, especially the ones that might not be so great, could be portrayed a little different than what reality is, right? So that that comes into play as well. But what I would have to say is that I don't think that what is happening with the Abraham Lincoln is outside the realm of normal military stressors that are indicative of military service. Specifically, yes, the deployment at sea may be a long time, but there are other elements at play here that these guys and gals on the aircraft carrier are not having to experience, right? They're definitely not experiencing what a frontline Army combat infantry unit would experience, depending on where they're at and where they're deployed and what that unit is doing. I mean, physically, the persons on that aircraft carrier are not doing the same things as a frontline infantry airborne combat unit, right? Parachute infantry. They're just not. I mean, you're not jumping out of airplanes onto a simulated target and then having to spend time in the field. You're not doing that. Just not happening. So it's if you compare and contrast, one job may have a benefit over another, but they all have their stresses, and unfortunately for the crew, one of those stresses right now is they're having to be deployed away from friends and family on an aircraft carrier for 250 days. Now, obviously, it looks like the Department of Defense is hearing what some friends and family and the crewmen on board these carriers are saying, because they're sending another aircraft carrier to possibly replace the Abraham Lincoln. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, I don't think anything that these guys are seeing is definitely not or has exceeded what other service members have experienced either in the past or even in the present. They just haven't. And unfortunately, I think you have some crewmen on this aircraft carrier that probably should not be in military service, right? They definitely should not be in the Navy, right? If they're having this sort of reaction to what's happening. I mean, God forbid, right, that a near-peer adversarial war starts, right, between maybe us and China or the Russian Federation or both. I mean, things would get tremendously more kinetic, and obviously service requirements would be extended, and things would look a lot different, even than they do now. It just would. So again, it just sounds like there's some personnel that probably shouldn't be in the armed forces, and just need to stiffen the upper lip and toughen up and deal with it. This will end. This will end. The deployment will end, and you'll go back home, and 20, 30 years into the future, you'll be able to share these experiences with your grandchildren, and you will probably look back on this experience in a different light than you're looking on it now on that aircraft carrier. So that's what I have to say about that. As always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. Good day.